This section is going to be all about conflict management. We're going to look at different approaches to take with different people and in different scenarios. And we're going to also talk about dangerous conflict. And we're going to just talk about how to make you feel more positive and more confident in going into difficult conversations in your lifetime. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is called the learning conversations model. And I learned about this from a book called Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most, written by Douglas Stone and colleagues all the way back in 1999, but it has been republished. There have been many updated editions since then. And what I think is really interesting is that he reminds us that learning how to have conflict is a skill that can be good for us. Most people feel anxious about dealing with conflict, but you don't have to. It can become a regular part of your life, and it can make you just a better person altogether when you learn how to do it well. So the problem with most of us when we enter conflict is we fall into really bad habits. We make unfair assumptions about what the other person wants or how they're acting, how they're feeling, where this conflict is stemming from. We can use emotionally charged language that instantly turns things sour, and we can start focusing on blame. You, instead of working together, in this we method. So if we can stop looking at conflict as a game, and looking for a victory, then we can, again, start handling them in ways that will benefit everybody. So a learning conversations model doesn't mean that you give up your stance. All right, forget what I said. We'll just go with what you said, or yeah, my opinion must be wrong, yours must be right. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that you consider both ideas as equally important and both persons' needs as equally important. And again, that is really freeing too. It takes a lot less energy. So there are a lot of steps for the learning conversations model, and what I've done in this workbook is just I've kind of consolidated them into 4 really important steps that I find are important. So the first one is to understand your own story better. Going back to that self-awareness from part 1, you need to really consider what you are feeling. Go back to that emotions wheel and think about, again, remember, feelings are complex. So what are the different things you're feeling? And you have to be willing to share those openly without judgment again. The second one is to eliminate those assumptions. A lot of our thinking is automatic. And again, the self-serving bias, we tend to think that our ideas are right, and we also assume the other people's ideas and other people's behaviors are automatically out to get us, or are wrong, or hurtful. So you can't make assumptions about the other person. You have to ask those questions. You have to be willing to listen carefully and think about, okay, what else? So this is my first thought is this, or my first reaction is this. What else could it be? How else might they be feeling? What else might they be trying to achieve? The third step in a learning conversations is to not place blame. Wasting time trying to figure out who's at fault just doesn't lead to a healthy conclusion at all. Instead, you need to engage in good two-way dialogue. You share and I share, and we look at that together, and that brings me to the fourth step. Get on the balcony. Think about like a bird's eye view, where you're both standing on a balcony looking down at the problem. So you're looking at it from a different perspective, okay? You're labeling it in just observational language, again, not emotionally charged. And this can help come up with some more creative ideas, and again, get rid of those assumptions, and you come up with fairer possibilities and fair outcomes. So it takes a little bit of time to go through a learning conversations model, but it is definitely worth it. So if you want to stop for a second, this is something I've done with my students, and they think it's kind of fun. So you could turn to a partner, or you could, just in your own head, think about a fairy tale that you know really well. Maybe it is Little Red Riding Hood or Cinderella or the Three Little Pigs. And I want you to think about how that story would go if a learning conversation were to take place. So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of one of those characters and try to first understand your own story better. Then try to eliminate assumptions about the other person. Don't place blame. I want you to ask questions to that other person. And then get on the balcony and really think about what are some other perspectives that we hadn't considered. What else is going on with the two of us? What else might we try? Like, how might we get through this in a different manner? The next approach to dealing with conflict is something called the STLC approach. Another acronym, because you know I like those acronyms. So this is something I've taught my students, and it's really, again, 4 simple steps. I feel like they're really mindful steps. So the first one, the S, is stop. When you're in a conflict, you need to stop physically and or mentally and just be present with that conflict. You know, your hands are going to want to do things and your mouth is going to want to say things, but you just need to stop and be aware of what's going on. Maybe take some deep breaths. Maybe take a little walk away from the other person and tell them you need to just be alone for a few minutes first before you actually, come to try to get through that conflict. So the first step is stop. The T is for think. And just like in the learning conversation, it's really about not placing blame. It's thinking through what might that person be feeling. Think about how am I feeling? What do I want? What do I think that they want? So you're really considering lots of different possible outcomes in the think step. And then the L is listen. Again, this is about walking away from yourself and just opening your ears to really carefully observe how they're feeling and hear what they want and hear what they're looking for. And in this step, you remember you want to avoid the poor listening practices. So you don't want to insert things, distorted listening. You don't want to interrupt. You don't want to turn it into your own, what you need in that narcissistic listening. You really just want to listen mindfully. And finally, the C is communicate. If you notice, it takes until the 4th step that you're finally actually saying anything. It's really important that you go through those first 3 steps, stop, think, and listen, before you do your own talking. And at this point, you want to remember the impact not only of your words, but of your behaviors, your body language. Avoid using sarcasm, rolling your eyes, crossing your arms. You want to remain open and calm and try to use neutral language as much as possible. And another thing for the STLC method is to take the time after the conversation has happened to really reflect. I want you to think about what went well in that process and maybe what didn't go so well that you would change for the next time. So it's really good practice to reflect how the process went so you can improve it and continue to use it in the future. So we're going to move to something called the third side model. There's an African proverb that I've heard that I really like, and it goes, when spider webs unite, they can halt even a lion. And I like that because it is the idea of lots of people coming together and from different perspectives and different ways of doing things to build that kind of collective sense of power and strength. So the third side model is really effective if you're in conflicts with a large group of people. Maybe it is a conflict, at your place of business or something in the community or at your church with a group of people. And the third side model comes from a guy named William Ury, and it's really about peaceful negotiation. You really go into conflict in a mediator fashion, like thinking of mediation, where you really try to get to the roots of the problem. and all parties are heard from, all stories are heard for sure. So it's a way of looking at conflicts, not to form a single perspective, but to really get this shared perspective that is supposed to benefit everybody and the larger community. So it's a lot like a learning conversations model, because you seek to understand all sides of the conflict. Like, why are you feeling this way? What are you coming at this from? What are you hoping for? What are your ideas? You really try to understand everybody. You encourage a process of cooperative negotiation. So you, again, use that neutral, fair, unbiased language. And it's trying to find a wise solution that meets the needs of all people involved, again, in that greater community too. So it's been used a lot of times in trying to handle like civil arguments, or again, local communities, local governments, things like that. But I think it really can be effective because it implies that nobody has more power than the other person. Nobody's ideas are more important than the others, and it really helps us find that shared common ground. So third side works when you are willing to honor all people involved and peacefully discuss an outcome that benefits everybody around you. Okay, we're going to go on to look at how to handle conflicts that are extremely emotional. A lot of times, conflicts do get emotional. It's the kind of conflict where there's often the most at stake, so they can really get out of hand quickly, and they are the ones that are most important to handle with some care and with some skill. So a couple things to remember. First of all, we have to remember that our own perspectives toward conflict and emotion is different. Some people are very expressive and show their feelings openly and talk about them openly. Non-expressive individuals might not be able to share those things as well. So we can view them differently. We can think of the expressive individual might think of the non-expressive as holding back or being disinterested, or just being difficult, when they just really don't know how to express themselves. And the opposite, the non-expressive, might find that expressive individual as irrational or out of control, when really they're just freer at sharing their emotions. So we have to remember that, for one thing. When it's an emotional conflict, the most important thing to do is to try to diffuse the atmosphere and try to lighten things up so you can be discussing whatever you are discussing in a calm, collective, more neutral manner. So there are a few steps that you can take. The first one is paraphrasing. When you are having emotional discussions, it is sometimes good to put into words how the other person is feeling. So you might say, okay, it sounds to me like you are, and you might try to paraphrase what you think you're hearing. It sounds to me like you're upset. It sounds to me like you're irritated. It sounds to me like you're irate. Try to paraphrase what you think you're hearing. Or you might say, well, that sounds like, or that must be, and again, just insert a feeling word. So put it in your words, what you think they are feeling, you think they are trying to express. A second step is validating. You want to make sure that you recognize that what the other person is saying or feeling is not necessarily wrong. They have the right to their feelings. And you also want to take ownership for your own part in the matter. You might say something like, okay, I can see that you're feeling very, okay, insert an appropriate feeling word. So you are acknowledging, like, okay, you are upset, and I understand that. You might even say, I understand why you're feeling, name the feeling, or I know that my behavior has caused you to feel, again, taking ownership there. So validating makes them not feel so tense and guarded about what they're feeling. They're freer to then talk about why they're feeling that way. So another step that can help us get to the bottom of what each person is feeling is questioning. And This helps us prevent reaching those unfair assumptions or jumping to false conclusions. You have to ask the questions about how the other person is feeling, what they are wanting from you, what they are needing. Okay, so just like that learning conversations model, you have to gather all the information that you can and then think about what kind of questions you want to ask. There are two basic kinds of questions, close-ended and open-ended. Close-ended is if you really just need to check for clarity. You need a fact, okay? Are you feeling upset? Are you mad at me? Are you angry that I spent the money on the new sofa? Okay, and that helps again when you just need to make sure you're not jumping to false conclusions. And open-ended questions allow the other person to share more freely. It can help you get a fuller idea of what that person is feeling. So these are the kind of questions that don't require a single answer, or it's not a yes or no, agree or disagree. You might say, what is it about my getting the couch or getting the sofa that upset you? Or you might say, how would you have liked to have solved this issue? Or how do you think we should have discussed this ahead of time? What should we do about this? What would you like to be for the two of us to do about this? So those kinds of practices can really be useful in having emotional conversations. So I want you to do some role playing. I'm going to give you two possible scenarios, and I'm going to have you partner up, and I'm going to have you try to act this out by using the three methods of paraphrasing, and then validating, and questioning. So your first option is to consider that you've got two roommates. Person A is extremely neat, likes everything in their place. And person B is kind of really messy, and their stuff is always untidy and never put together. So person A has had enough. Person A is at his or her wit's ends and needs to figure something out with person B. Okay, you could try that option. Or the second option, you could say that person A used their hard-earned money to buy a brand new, really nice pair of shoes. Person B borrowed them without asking and brought them back in less than ideal condition. So person A, of course, is very angry and hurt that person B would take their new pair of shoes and ruin them. So I want you to take a minute or two and practice that. Again, how would you paraphrase what you're hearing from the other person? How would you validate what that other person is feeling? And what kind of questions could you ask to help solve conflict? So now I want to talk about how to handle conflicts with specific personality types. This was in an article from Reader's Digest in 2023. It was called How to Get Along with Anyone. And the author, her name is Rosemary Counter, she provides some really good tips for dealing with specific individuals. So I'm going to tell you about just a few of them. The first is complainers. We all know them, people who just don't ever stop rattling off negative ideas and words about anything you bring up. And actually, Counter suggests when we're having conversations with this type of person, we really just want to empathize. We want to show them kindness because we all know kindness rubs off. And once they can be surrounded by your positive energy and enough kindness, a lot of times it kind of diffuses them. It allows them to soften up a little bit and maybe even tone down their own ways of talking about things. So again, complainers, let them complain, ask them why they're feeling that way, and just be kind, extra nice to them. The second is contrarians. Contrarians will disagree with whatever you say. It doesn't matter what it is. I know people like that. They will just, they're the devil's advocate for everything you have to say. And, you know, with this type of person, it's okay to say, I agree with you on that part. I agree with you about this, but I'm also wondering if we could discuss this, or I also think there's another way of looking at this part of it. So if you agree with them on part of it, it makes them maybe less likely to attack. They're not on guard, ready to attack, and you can probably more calmly get into a two-way conversation. The next is chatterboxes, people who just hog the conversation, talk nonstop. I know I have been told sometimes I can be a chatterbox. I blame my mom and she blames her mom. So whether it's genetically induced or not, some people just like to talk a lot. But also, deep down, the reason that some people like to do a lot of the talking is that they feel a need to be heard. Maybe they don't have anybody who will listen to them. So letting them talk is okay. And then you might want to jump in and say, hey, I'd like to tell you about, or I'd like to share this about you, about me. Or if you're on a time constraint, you can even say something like, okay, I have 3 more minutes and I'd still like to ask you something about this. Okay, so then it forces them to say, oh, yeah, okay, it's your turn. So that's how you might handle a chatterbox. Then we have the frenemies. You know who they are. These are people who seem to be your friends, but they're hot one minute, they're cold the next. You really don't know where they stand. And according to Counter, frenemies oftentimes act that way because deep down they have a sense of uncertainty about who they are, or a sense of paranoia that they have to be a certain way in order to be liked, or just they're always on the defensive. And so with frenemies, sometimes it's best to be straight with them, to tell them how you feel. You might say something like, I value our friendship, but when you talk to me in this way, I feel X, Y, or Z. Or I believe we're friends, but I don't always think that friends should say those kind of things to their other friends. So those are some ways to handle different personality types. Now let's talk about family, because those of us who are in family know that family conflict is almost inevitable, whether we're fighting about shared spaces or rules laid down or money, the big one. It's really not uncommon for families to find themselves, again, a lot of times it's a pattern, like they're having the same arguments again and again and again because don't know how to really get through them in a proper way. It's also interesting to know that in the US, 40% of families are now considered blended families. So you have, this parent and his children, and you've got that parent and her children, and then they have children together, and all of that is just right ground for conflict. So there are lots of ways to manage family conflict. First and foremost, it really should be about, the love and care you have for one another. Remembering the things that you do and say will impact the family. So you should do and say things that are going to be beneficial and show your loving kindness and compassion, forgiveness, and understanding for sure. So there are 3 different suggestions that I'm going to offer you. The first one is to plan regular family meetings. You can do this in a couple different ways. The first way is to have a set meeting day. Maybe it is every Sunday night, or maybe it is the first and third Mondays of the month. You have an agreed time, one in which everybody can participate, everybody is home, it's an okay time for everybody. Some people are not morning people, some people are, really get tired and grumpy in the evenings. So find a time that works, and you really need to be willing to just share openly. If you have a regular family meeting where everybody goes around and shares what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what things are concerning them of late, then it's not a reactive thing to the dysfunction. It is just a normal, healthy routine. And routines in family are really, really important. The more you can develop kind of traditions and routines like that, the stronger research says your family will be. Otherwise, if you are going to have more reactive family meeting because something did happen and you want everybody to be able to sit down and calmly work through it, then what you should do probably is, again, find an agreed upon time where everyone can participate, and maybe create an agenda ahead of time. So nobody is surprised going in. Everybody knows the things that are going to be talked about. Everybody has, again, a fair chance to say, what they want, say how they feel. And again, the most important thing for a family meeting is to end on a positive note. Maybe you finish with a celebration of look at what we've accomplished. Or maybe there's a go around and everybody talks about one positive thing they got out of the family meeting. So family meetings, although if they're not the norm, they can feel a little bit, uncomfortable at first, they really can become valuable. The second idea I'm going to present for family conflicts is something called green light brainstorming. This is a technique I use in my class anytime I want everybody to have a voice. I want everyone to be able to freely share their ideas without any kind of criticism or questioning. So the idea is that one person is writing down everything that is heard. If you're able to use like a dry erase board or a big poster board or something like that, that's ideal, because then everybody can see the ideas that are being spoken. But even if it's just on a sheet of paper, the idea is that anything can be said. One person says something, and then that might trigger another person wanting to say the next thing. You can't argue with what is said. You can't say that's a dumb idea, or that's not right, or, well, that's, I don't think so. You just let everything come out. And then you step away for a few minutes, you think about it, you come back, and you try to discuss what's going on here, okay? So what are we noticing? What are people feeling? What are people thinking? What are some possible outcomes? What are some possible solutions? So that is green light brainstorming. And the third one is creating a family contract. There are a lot of issues in the family, again, things that just keep cycling, keep coming back up, that might really require a contract. So it might be, the family's monthly budget, or it might be something like cell phone usage, or ability to watch TV. It might be maybe you have a teenager who has gotten a driver's license, or has a new significant other, or is now wanting to stay out later. And so you create a contract with these things. People argue that parents should be able to set the rules, and children should just be able to follow them. But if it doesn't happen, it requires understanding why. So in a family contract, you talk through what everybody wants to happen, what everybody feels should happen, and then you create a list of expectations. These are the expectations, these are the non-negotiables, things that absolutely must be abided by, and these are the consequences for not following through on those actions. So it can be a really healthy practice to put into play in your families. So I want you to stop and think about which of these three ideas might help your family. If you are part of a family, and most of you, I'm guessing, are. Do you think a family meeting would be beneficial for your families? And do you think having a green light brainstorming session would be good about maybe a hot topic that's been coming up? Or do you think it's time to create a contract where all voices are heard from? Okay, so you guys have been doing really great. There's one more category I want to discuss with you, and that is handling conflict that is not face-to-face. Because with the rise of all things technology, this kind of communication is becoming all the more popular, and it is likely that we're going to have conflict, whether it's over a phone call or over an email at some point in our lives. So this is referred to as mediated communication. And again, that includes phone calls, emails, text messages, video conferencing, like Skype or Google Meets or Zoom, and all things that are, again, other than face-to-face. So there are some different challenges to consider when you're having conflicts of this nature. We're going to look at three specific types of mediated communication conflict, and maybe tips for dealing with each of those. So the first one we're going to talk about is how to handle conflicts over text or email. Of course, you know that one problem with this is the absence of the nonverbal communication. You don't know the tone behind the words that were used. You don't know what that person's body was looking like while they were sending that email. So sometimes we can jump to conclusions about the emotion behind the words. And obviously then one thing that's really important is for us to be very clear, great clarity in our words, to be thorough and explain carefully what we are saying. And on the other, and to make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions. Another thing that is tricky about emails and texts is that they are non-synchronous. So sometimes you have to wait, and that waiting can be really frustrating. It's hard sometimes for me to have patience when I just want a response, or I want more. I want to know what they meant by that last comment. So you can't jump to conclusions. You do not want to quickly reply. You want to give them a chance to fully say what they have to say in the email exchange or the text exchange before you quickly respond with your own. So again, it just has to be done very carefully and thoughtfully, being again mindful, non-reactive, non-judgmental, not making assumptions. The next category we'll talk about is phone calls. Most communication experts say that if it's something really emotional or something really important, a phone call is probably better than a text or an email. That being said, there are experts who say that it's not a bad idea to, instead of calling that person who might not be ready for what you have to say, to give them a fair warning with an email or a text. Think about it almost like in the family meetings if you were to set that agenda. You might give an email or send a text ahead of time saying, hey, just want you to know I'm feeling really uncomfortable about this or that, and I was hoping we could talk about it. I'd like to call you later. So you can at least give them time to think through their own feelings and be prepared for it, and so they won't be so reactive and so thrown off. When you are in a phone conversation and it's difficult, of course, then we do have the tone of voice. That can be beneficial, or again, it can be challenging. When the emotions are extreme or heightened, we have to just be careful to, again, kind of diffuse those high emotions and be empathetic, maybe clarify how we're feeling or ask those questions about how the other person is feeling. But again, when you have the option, a phone call, if it's a difficult or challenging topic, is probably the better option. And the third type of mediated communication conflict that we'll talk about is over social media. Many people have several social media accounts. I try to stick to one. It's all I think I would like to put time into in my day. But I think of Facebook alone. They say Facebook now has over 3 billion users. And to put that into perspective, that is more than the population of the entire continent of Africa. So there are so many people out there on social media, and there's great potential for a lot of wonderful things and wonderful conversations to take place, but it doesn't always happen that way. People, I think, their ideas tend to be so extreme on social media, and people respond to people they don't even know with such negative comments. So again, you need to really practice very empathic, careful conversation. I want you to think back to the STLC method. And when you are engaging in a conversation that's difficult over social media, I want you to stop, okay? And I want you to be aware of how you're feeling. Like, why am I feeling so upset by that comment? Like, why do I feel this way? What do I think they're really trying to say? Why am I angry at that person? So stop and think about it. And then I want you to carefully respond after you've done some thinking through it. You can also try to use the third side model, in which you really try to hear all perspectives, ask some questions, and try to find a common ground and a solution that is best for not just the 2, 3, 4, maybe 50 people having the conversation, but everybody in the greater community. So these are practices to put into place that can really help us when we are dealing with conflicts that are not face-to-face. So think about your own life, and I want you to think about your own habits on mediated communication. When you send texts, when you send emails, do you use thoughtful words? Do you reply to people only after thinking, or do you reply quickly and maybe with assumptions? In social media, do you get caught up in kind of dangerous conversations, or do you feel like you can freely and openly share your ideas in a way that are non-judgmental and won't hurt other people. One final thing to consider, especially when it comes to social media, is that you need to take steps to prevent yourself from being hurt, I guess. If there are conversations that ever get really hurtful or almost threatening, you can do lots of different things. You can report them, you can block them, you can unfriend them, you can even report them. So we always have to be careful that we're not feeling worried about the communication that was shared or spread online or over text or over emails. So that wraps up our sessions on healthy communication. I hope you have walked away with something helpful, and in the workbook I've shared, there are lots of additional resources. You can take quizzes to learn more about yourself. You can visit any of those. There are lots of really good videos to put these different techniques into practice, and hopefully come away feeling like, hey, I feel good about myself as a communicator, and even when the conversations are difficult. So thank you for your time, and I wish you the best of luck.